Tonight, we're looking at a huge shift in Europe's migration story. The latest data from September 2025 shows something of a paradox. On one hand, fewer people are arriving at the EU's borders. But on the other, the global displacement crisis is actually getting worse and a lot more unequal. So we're going to break down what these numbers really mean, from the new policies being rolled out in Europe to the human stories behind this global trend. Let's dive right in. So, we'll start inside the European Union itself, because the latest figures from the bloc's key agencies are pointing to a pretty significant and, honestly, for a lot of observers, an unexpected downturn in migration pressure. The numbers right across the board are showing a real decrease, and that could signal a completely new phase. All right, let's kick things off with the headline number from Frontex, the EU's border agency. Irregular entries into the bloc? They've plummeted by a massive 21% in just the first 8 months of 2025. You know, a 1/5 reduction in that short a time frame is a huge shift from the trends we've been seeing over the last few years. And it's not just happening at the borders. The number of people actually applying for asylum once they're inside the EU is also down by 23%. So you've got two different, really important data sets telling us the exact same story. Fewer people are arriving, and fewer are applying for protection. But here's where the story gets really complicated. This slowdown inside of Europe stands in stark, almost jarring contrast to what's happening globally. While the numbers inside the EU are trending down, international agencies are sounding the alarm over a crisis that's not only escalating, but is also profoundly unequal as it unfolds across the rest of the world. A truly groundbreaking joint report from the IOM and IDMC gives us this stunningly clear picture of the world's most vulnerable people. They analyzed millions of cases of internal displacement, and what they found is staggering. 93% of these populations earn less than the global average, and it goes beyond just poverty. 2/3 have limited education, and a shocking 61% face a shorter life expectancy. This isn't just a crisis of people moving, it's a crisis of deep systemic disadvantage. As Ugochi Daniels of the IOM puts it so well, this kind of deep research puts a real human face on these statistics. It moves the conversation beyond just abstract dots on a map and forces us to look at the real lives being shaped and often shattered by displacement. It's a clear call for governments to move from just seeing the data to actually doing something about it. And to truly grasp the sheer scale of these inequalities, the report gives us these really stark comparisons. Just look at the difference here. On one side, you have communities uprooted by drought in the Horn of Africa. The average age is just 18, and they're surviving on only about $2,400 a year. On the other side, you have people displaced by wildfires in the US. They're older, more educated, with an average income approaching $79,000. It's literally two different worlds experiencing two vastly different kinds of crises. And this is why that evidence is so critical. As IDMC Director Alexandra Bilak points out, this is the foundation for any meaningful action. The whole idea is that with this kind of detailed data, governments and aid partners can finally move beyond a one-size-fits-all response and start directing resources precisely where they are needed the most. Okay, so with that global context in mind, let's circle back to Europe and break down those numbers a bit more. That overall 21% drop, well, it isn't happening everywhere equally. The data actually reveals huge shifts in the routes people are taking. Some of the historic pathways are quieting down, while others are seeing a really notable surge. We're seeing some really dramatic declines on what used to be the busiest corridors. The Western Balkan route is down 47%. The Western African route has basically been cut in half, down 52%. But then you look at the Western Mediterranean, and it's bucking that trend completely, with a 22% increase, mostly driven by people leaving from Algeria. Now, despite all those shifts, the Central Mediterranean is still the single busiest pathway into Europe. With almost 42,000 arrivals, it accounts for more than a third of all irregular entries. The numbers there are pretty stable, but there's a new trend. Smugglers in Libya are now shifting to faster, more profitable speedboats. But here's the most crucial and, frankly, the most tragic takeaway. Even with overall arrivals down, the IOM estimates that more than 1,100 people have died trying to cross the Mediterranean this year alone. Lower numbers do not mean lower risk. So in response to all of these complex and shifting dynamics, European leaders are signaling a very distinct pivot in their policy. The emerging consensus seems to be a much tougher stance, with a renewed focus on enforcement, on returns, and on cracking down on the criminal networks behind irregular migration. A major part of this story is the huge shift in who is seeking asylum in Europe. Venezuelans, have now emerged as the largest group of applicants, filing 49,000 claims. That's a 31% increase, and nearly all of them are in Spain. But the most dramatic change? That's among Syrians. Following the fall of the Assad regime, their applications have fallen by a staggering 2/3. And that change in nationalities has had a direct knock-on effect on the primary destinations. For years, Germany was the top recipient, in large part because of Syrian arrivals. But now that map has been completely redrawn. France is now at the top of the list, followed very, very closely by Spain, with Germany now in third place. And it's so important to remember that all of this is happening alongside the ongoing response to the war in Ukraine. The asylum figures we've been talking about are completely separate from the 4.34 million Ukrainians, mostly women and children, who are being hosted across the EU under a special temporary protection directive. And that's now been extended all the way to 2027. So what is the EU going to do about all this? Well, in her recent State of the Union address, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced a major policy pivot. She's targeting not the migrants themselves, but the smuggling networks that profit from them. She called for a brand new system of sanctions designed to freeze their assets, restrict their ability to move, and, critically, to cut off their profits. It's a clear signal of intent to dismantle their entire business model. Her proposal lays out a really clear three-pronged approach. First, triple the funding for migration and border management. Second, create that new legal framework for sanctions against smugglers. And third, push for a unified and much more efficient common European system for returning rejected asylum seekers. And this number right here is what's driving that big push for a common return system. President von der Leyen called the current rate, where only about 20%, just 1 in 5, rejected applicants actually leave the EU, she called it unsustainable. The big goal is for the EU's new Migration and Asylum Pact, which is coming in 2026, to make this whole process far more effective. Now, looking ahead, Europe is on the verge of a massive technological overhaul of its external borders. And this isn't just a minor tweak. This is something that will fundamentally change how all non-EU travelers enter and exit the Schengen area. You could say the era of the classic passport stamp is officially coming to an end. And this transition is happening fast. The rollout begins in just a few weeks, in October 2025, with the new entry/exit system, or EES. It'll be fully operational across the entire Schengen area by April 2026, and that will be followed by the launch of the ETIAS authorization system later that same year. So what is this entry/exit system? Well, think of it as an automated system that's going to digitally register non-EU nationals right at the border, replacing all that manual passport stamping. It will collect biometric data to confirm identities, and for the authorities, it creates a really powerful tool to track entries, exits, and instantly identify anyone who overstays their visa. And right after that comes ETIAS. Now, if you've ever traveled to the United States, this will sound really familiar. It's a lot like their ESTA program. It's going to require travelers from 59 different visa-free countries to apply for online authorization before they even begin their journey. The application will cost €20, it'll be valid for 3 years, and it adds a whole new security screening step before a passenger even gets on a plane. So, what does this all add up to? When you pull all these threads together, the data paints a very clear, if very complex, picture. On one side, you have a Europe that's tightening its controls with new policies and new technologies, which is resulting in fewer irregular arrivals. And at the exact same time, you have a world where the things that push people from their homes, conflict, climate change, inequality, are all growing more severe. And this confluence of trends leaves Europe, and really the world, with a defining question. As the continent builds its digital borders and strengthens its enforcement policies, how will it balance the undeniable need for security with the core principles of fairness and the humanitarian imperative to support people on the move? The answer to that question is going to shape not just migration policy, but the very character of the continent for a generation to come.